Hello and welcome to the first episode of Machine Guns in Your Movies podcast. My name is Sasha,
And I'm Joel.
and in this podcast we're going to cover all kinds of movies that we like. The name sounds like that, basically, kind of eclectic, and basically we wanted to cover every kind of movie, every genre, and the name basically is connected to that, and it's connected to the one particular story which might or might not be true, and which is where we got inspiration for the name. So what the story is about, do you want to tell?
Yes, thank you very much. I believe I shall. Yes, it's based on an old anecdote that came from Roger Ebert that, as my co-host mentioned, may or may not be true, but it regards around an anecdote. It goes as follows. I have a favorite Bronson story. Both Bronson and the Swedish film director Ingmar Bergman had the same agent, Paul Kohner, and the same publicist, the legendary Ernie Anderson. Bronson was making an action picture at the time, and Kohner assigned Anderson to arrange a meeting between two clients. Anderson was hesitant because Bronson sometimes kidded him. I know this isn't a Bergman picture, but it may make a few bucks. After he introduced the two men, Bergman asked him to explain the scene to him. Is this the scene where I get shot? Bronson said. This is the scene where I get shot, Bronson said. I have these little squibs that explodes to make it look like bullets are hitting. Fascinating, said Bergman. I never knew how they did that. You mean, asked Bronson, you don't use machine guns in your movies? And that's the story.
Yeah, basically. And we don't know if it's true, but it's certainly an interesting story, and in a way it's connected to the one of the main, uh, at least my opinion. I mean, the things that we want to cover in this podcast, and this is like that there is no that in the end there is no such thing as a high and low cinema. There is like all kinds of cinema are worthy of analyzing and of liking and of watching, and that certainly there are certain objective things that objective ABCD of movies, basically, that you use to see to analyze the movie. But in the end, uh, I mean, there's no such thing as, like, if the movie has machine guns in it, or if it's like an action movie, that it's automatically less worthy of a Bergman movie. In a way, that's basically the idea, that it's not true. And the movie we want to cover today is, I think, the living proof of that. I mean, and we're gonna talk about James Cameron's. I'm not gonna. It's James Cameron's real debut, in a way, movie, and that's the Terminator from 1984. I mean, he had a movie before that, obviously, that the sequel to Piranha, but this was, in a way, his real debut.
Yes, the 1984's Terminator. It's a great film. Sasha and I discussed this, which should be our inaugural episode, and we came across this one. I've seen this one on several occasions. It's an outstanding movie, and I just love discussing it. And it's really impressive. It has all the makings of a bog standard action film, but sci-fi. But I think it if you'll pardon the pun, it has a sort of timeless feel to it, and I feel that's what's allowed it to resonate with audiences all these decades later, or more than 40 years after its release. And just even on way back then, James Cameron had a style and skill all his own, and it's what allowed him to stand out and become one of the most respected and successful filmmakers really in the world, frankly.
Yeah, yeah, he had a certainly the style and the skill, and I mean, he worked for Roger Corman before that, and he like he did made paintings for several movies, and he was a very skilled part of his crew, and basically he his first, like, the real debut like the actual debut movie was Piranha Part Two, the sequel to Jodante movie. And while he was editing, as far as I remember the story, this might not be the completely true, but as far as I remember, he was. Of course, they took the film from him, and they re-edit the footage and everything. I mean, it was not a good footage to start with, but they made basically like made it even worse. And then he, as far as I know, broke into the studio and made his own edit. And during that time, or like I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's during that time he had a dream of like a robot, like a kind of a skeletal metal structure, basically. I don't remember if it was like chasing some girl, or it was just a solo, like just a skeletal metal structure by itself, going like through the chasing someone. And he had like a fever. He had a fever dream. Basically, he was dreaming while he was having a fever, and that was the basically a spark, an inspiration for the Terminator. And then he basically wrote the script based on that image, and we have that at the end of the movie. Basically, the last third, or the last part of the movie is like a prolonged chase scene when we don't see Schwarzenegger anymore, Schwarzenegger's character anymore, and we see these like a skeletal metal structure when the film really goes into the slasher horror territory in a way.
Yes, I find that interesting. For as I recall the anecdote, it was literally some sort of metallic robotic skeletal structure emerging from the flame, which is more pertinent to what happens in the actual movie when the T-800 has its damage, its flesh gets so badly damaged from the exploding fire that it just emerges from the fire, and it's after throughout we take it for granted, modern audiences take it for granted who've seen it a million times, as well as the sequel take it for granted. But it's interesting to think that at some point the innards of what the T-800 was, the antagonist from the film, was actually something of a mystery. We didn't know what it was. It's only revealed near the very end when it finally crawls out of the
Yeah.
fire, admittedly with one of its legs heavily damaged, which hampers it. But yeah, and as Sasha just mentioned, it's interesting what you mentioned, Sasha, because I always thought it was curious the way the film seems to straddle the horror genre without completely emerging. It dips its toes into the horror genre, sometimes going as far as into the knee, but it never fully dips into it. It
Mhm.
always seems to restrain itself from fully going into it, and I always thought that was kind of a fascinating element of it. Both of Sasha and I are huge horror buffs, and we both like it, but it's something interesting I've observed. Like certain people, it's sort of like if the age-old debate of whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It's whether Terminator is a horror movie is something of a contentious issue. I get not contentious, but it's a discussed issue per se.
Yeah, I always like to mention that horror element, maybe because of my personal preference for horror, but basically it is in a way for me an action sci-fi horror film. It is action sci-fi horror film if you want to define it really. But but when it comes to the definition, I mean, and the quality of the film itself, it's one big monolith of a movie in a way. I mean, I really I cannot find almost anything bad to say about it in a way, except for maybe, yeah, you can see that they didn't have enough budget for a certain effects, like when the skin is torn off the Schwarzenegger's face, or some of the effects like that. You can see that the budget was, if only he had a little more money to do that. But basically, other than that, I don't really have much or anything else bad to say about the movie. I mean, generally, I mean, there are some, maybe some little things, but generally, that movie is one big, like a monolith of a, like a really well made directed movie. The direction is perfect. The pacing is perfect. The screenplay serves the story. Everything serves the characters well. The acting is really good, and I mean, Schwarzenegger is perfect for the lead role. And people can, I mean, laugh all they want, or make fun of the his accent, or things like that, but I mean, he's simply perfect for that role. And it's the right people at the right place for the right roles, basically. I mean, and the little Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn, all of them are great also. So I mean, the movie is one big, in a way, like it's kind of a monolith of a very well directed and all, I mean, very well put together movie.
Yeah, what's interesting you mentioned that. I'm now just the thought occurred to me, but it's kind of amusing that there's an alternate timeline out there. Was either Lance Henriksen, who is in the movie, he plays one of the police detectives, And in probably another universe or another timeline, it might be somebody like O.J. Simpson, which literally was suggested. And it's also interesting you mentioned that the casting has is quite fascinating because at some point Arnold Schwarzenegger was initially planned to be the protagonist,
Yeah.
and he was supposed to play Kyle Reese.
Mhm.
But when James Cameron met him, as from what I recall, he had a change of heart. He brilliantly made the decision to cast him as the T-800, and it was just fantastic. Like, um, people will have knocked him for his acting abilities, but like, it's just. I know this sounds might sound silly, but I guess that's the nature of the show. The highbrow and lowbrow and mixing in between. But Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance is incredible in this. Like, it's almost impossible to imagine somebody else pulling off the role
Mhm.
as well as he did. He's just perfectly menacing. And yeah, I even remember reading the other day about James Cameron himself noticed that everything seemed to mesh well with him in the lead role, and how even his accent worked because it felt like this was a machine or think of it as some sort of AI program that was trying to mimic human speech, but it didn't quite mesh well. It's
Mhm.
as a result, there's this unusual accent coming from it.
Yeah, and as far as I remember, this might not be true, but as far as I remember, during the shooting, they had a well, either it was "I'll be back" scene or some other scene. I forgot exactly which one, but Schwarzenegger was trying to use like a little bit of different accent and trying to sound differently and things like that. And the James Cameron was basically encouraging him to go back to his original like accent. As far as I know, I'm not exactly sure about this, but I think I read this somewhere that basically it was like yeah, to go like to have one tone during the whole movie and then not go, do not switch to something else, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to mention, sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to mention, I think I know what your anecdote you're speaking of. From everything I've said, there's suggests that it's more of a case of Arnold Schwarzenegger tried suggesting that they just say, "I will be back." He felt his character should say that because
Oh,
it's an AI program and a machine, and it should refrain from using contractions. It would be sort of like the character Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation. But ultimately, Cameron prevailed and he insisted. It said, "Look, I'm the screenwriter. I don't tell you to act, so don't tell me how to write the lines." And he ultimately insisted on that, and it ended up being again, it's like his instincts completely paid off. It's now the line became legendary. Like, there's a reason that Schwarzenegger keeps repeating it. There's a reason that the
oh,
when I worked at a hostel in Mexico, when the owners kept saying it because that line really permeates. It works with people. It's a good
oh,
line, and his instincts were right. But yeah,
oh.
that's what. And anyway, that's what I recall hearing about the anecdote itself.
And that's correct. I think that's the actually how it happened. Yeah, and it's a, I mean, iconic line. You can say it anywhere in the world in that tone, and people will recognize it. So yeah, I mean, it's one of these things. And I guess we don't need really to tell the story of the movie. Everybody or almost everybody have seen the Terminator, but I mean, it's a yeah, but
Or they should.
or they if they haven't seen it, I mean, they definitely should. And one of the things I wanted to talk about the film also is connected to what we just talked about, is how the movie, there is a certain like the movie is like a one big stone with a rough surface. In a way, there is a certain roughness, which is not a bad thing. There's like this kind of threatening aura of that movie, around that movie, in a way. The way everything is put together, the way Schwarzenegger acts, and all of that, and you can it's so well directed and acted. I mean, you can sense the danger in the scenes where he appears, and that's something and also in the last part of the film, when of course we don't see him anymore, but we see this skeletal thing chasing after the heroine of the film. But basically, there's that feeling of this kind of a the danger, and that's another. I guess, I mean, partially why it's like an action, like a great um, action movie, but it's also that horror element, I guess. I mean, there's
Yeah,
this threatening element in it.
yeah. When you see him going in the like when it really is kind of an unnerving like people can list numerous things that are scary in horror movies like usually with always but seeing that T-800 wander through that hallway even though it's like a fairly obvious animatronic or I think it's no not animatronic a sort of stop motion it's just really threatening and unnerving seeing that
Yeah.
this thing crawl through a hallway that seems to an abandoned warehouse where they're factory where they're completely cornered and it seems to just refuse to die no matter what, and it's such an excellent this nightmarish feeling about it. So like Cameron completely, it feels almost like the plot of Inception being made into a film. Cameron completely nailed the feeling of the quality of being in a nightmare, and
Yeah.
during that scene, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a that nightmare feeling. And when it comes to the production, is that roughness is also, I guess, is a kind of mirrors the production itself in a way because when I mean you can see that in the making of the film basically, but the Cameron has told that numerous times. Like for example, when they were like shooting a scene when he smashes the car window or something like that, they really did go to the parking lot and smash the window of the car. At least that's what Schwarzenegger and Cameron said. I don't know if it's maybe they made that up. I don't know, but. I would like to think that it's true because it adds to that it has that guerrilla filmmaking element to it too, which adds to the overall feeling of the film. I would say. I mean, and you can and also it's obviously a low budget film, but you don't see it. You almost don't see it. I mean, except for the some of the scenes that I mentioned, like where the effects are like make with the makeup effects and little things like that, but basically you don't see it. But it has that feeling of like a guerrilla filmmaking, and which adds to the overall that's kind of a threatening and rough feel of the film itself, I would say.
Well, I'm just impressed by what is it? You mentioned that, and like the amount of budget is just insane. Like if you look at the futuristic images, it's almost like unbelievable how much they were able to get that on a micro budget and pull off this. I guess it
Mm,
wouldn't be too hard. You just need to like make junkyards or something of that sort. But like these robots going around blowing up
mm,
soldiers and things of that nature, just it's very impressive. And like it again, it's like the dystopias don't really quite count as horrors per se, but like this 1984, which was released in the same year as this one, but they have this feeling of constant dread of like a potential horrific future that humanity might fall into. But yeah,
mm,
speaking of back into the on the subject of time itself, there is something I recently watched. I'm not certain if you or others might be aware of this, but there was an infamous instance of accusation of plagiarisms by one Harlan Ellison against this film. He said he did enjoy the film
mm.
itself, but he felt that it was plagiarized as a rip. In his own words, it was a rip off of his one of his Outer Limits episode called Soldier. And I've recently watched it. It's a very interesting accusations. I'm not certain it holds weight. James Cameron has very famously been opposed to it, but Orion overruled him and said that they just decided not to contest this and gave him a credit for it. But in the episode itself, it's actually quite fascinating. Michael Ansara plays a soldier from the future who's sent back in time, but that's almost the beginning and the end of all the similarities to it. Like there is a
Mm.
psychiatrist involved as one as such. I think it's Michael Banner or something, an actor whose name I can't quite recall. The psychiatrist from the Terminator. But in the actual episode of The Outer Limits, the soldier, he actually seems to understand that he really is a soldier from the future,
Mhm.
and it's actually kind of odd. It's almost like the soldier, his name is Carlo. It's almost like he's a combination of both the Terminator itself and Kyle Reese. Like he's still an ordinary man, a soldier sent back in time, but he's also like a remorseless, heavily brainwashed killing machine. He's actually a human. There are certain he's altered over time, but other than that, the similarities are not very similar. There's not that. That is to say, it's not exceedingly similar to James Cameron plot. They've made quite a few changes. and I'm not certain it holds weight, but I figured I'd watch the actual episode and see if there's any weight to the Harlan Ellison's accusations, and I can't say that they are. I imagine you've heard of this story.
Yeah, I know the story, but I haven't seen the actual episode. But I heard about the story itself. Yeah, there's several stories like that about certain films. Yeah, where they're like some of these are true, some not. But yeah, I guess this one is not. But I haven't seen the episode, so I cannot really say. But I trust you. I'm sure that it's not that similar.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to make an accusation, there's actually a part, honestly, some parts of it might be more similar to another early 80s action film that started a major franchise featuring an icon of that era. It would be First Blood with Sylvester Stallone, because it's basically about a soldier desperately trying to acclimate to civilian life. And despite his best efforts and somebody, a mentor, trying to get him back on track, he ultimately ends up going berserk at some point. So
Mm,
it has
mm.
similarities to that film.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
obviously, First
not
Blood lacked
another.
any science fiction elements. So, but I
Mm,
just thought it was interesting, and it's sort of an interesting anecdote. And I think it's a bit tragic. I don't feel that, frankly, if I were to make an assessment, I don't think that it's quite fair to
mm.
call a Terminator ripoff. There's
Like,
far too many
yeah.
divergent points, but it's I guess it's one of the many, many, many things that make this film so damn fascinating and so fun to talk about.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what if you even if you're like going against it like that, it's still but that image also is very it's kind of archetypal image, so it's really sometimes it's really hard to say that somebody copied someone like this kind of a soldier from the future, or this kind of a soldier killing machine trying to cope with this civilian life or this kind of thing. It's a very archetypal, very it's something that has been repeated many times in movies. So I mean it's not like no other movie has used something similar. So I mean it's sometimes it's really hard to say like, oh, you copied me or something. Yeah, when it comes to this particular image and the team. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so, but we were just getting their legs warmed. There was a massive glut of sci-fi stories being produced in the 50s and 60s. It was almost practically a golden age. People like Robert Heinlein and the aforementioned Harlan Ellison were really making their business in that time. Stuff like shows like obviously Outer Limits, as well as Twilight Zone, were coming out, and yeah, there must have been many, many stories. I still have not yet seen Demon in with a Glass Hand, which I've been also told is similar to, which has also been stated to be similar. But in any event, one of the things that I also enjoyed was thinking about it's like one of the things that's interesting about Kyle Reese is how he retains his humanity. He's basically, despite growing up on the same environment, thinking about it, it's so odd is that the T-800 seems logical for its environment. It's just a cold, remorseless killing machine from a thirsty and heinous future. And Kyle Reese is just like a man who's obviously like he lives in absolute, pretty much a living hell, waking up, having to eat rats or live in tunnels to avoid getting killed by psychotic robots. And at the end, when they escape from that incredible scene at the police station, like there's humanity in him. He's just happy to be back home. It's interesting, but to him, our timeline is a utopia, actually.
Yeah, and there's almost something I wouldn't say, maybe that's unintentional, but there's almost something like almost like a religious about it, like almost like he's sort of a messianic figure in a way, and the way there's like this kind of opposing sides. Maybe that's unintentional, but there's kind of that feeling that's basically why he goes I mean the way he goes like still retains his humanity, and he has one purpose to only, and all of these things. There is a certain kind of religious feeling about all of this, about the whole story in a way. Maybe that's unintentional. Maybe that's just my observation. But basically, I found that also kind of interesting, at least in my opinion.
Well, it's not there's, I think if you look at it from a religious standpoint, there's quite a few elements that feel seem to feed that narrative or create help that interpretation out. For example, the person coming to save humanity is named John Connor, so his initials are JC, and
Mm,
his inception is bizarre. It's an unusual,
mm,
unheard of event, basically sired by a man from the future. And I
mm.
always thought that was funny. If you want to get very technical, it's a paradox. It doesn't make any sense. Like, who
Yeah.
sired John Connor initially? It couldn't have been Kyle Reese because he's. It seems to not make much sense if you think about it. But people generally tend to go along with it. I'm not the only one, and there's literally the. It's he's trying to prevent an apocalypse, and yeah, almost like maybe the T-800 is sort of like a antichrist figure. He's trying to prevent Christ from coming into this world. But it's interesting
Mm.
you mentioned religious. You saw religious ones because it's not unusual for people to take that interpretation of the film as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the very fact that it's that's not all the mechanics of his coming back and all of coming and all these things that they don't sound logical. The very fact that that's how it is, it makes it maybe even more mysterious and religious in a way. And when it comes to the religious, I mean, iconography and interpretation, the movie that came a couple of years after that, the RoboCop, has a clear intentional religious symbolism. I mean, but we I guess we're gonna talk about that when we talk about RoboCop. But yeah, Paul Verhoeven intentionally made RoboCop like a Christ figure in a way, and not intentionally made him be that. And yeah, so in Terminator, that's, I'm sure, probably unintentional, but yeah, it's certainly interesting to think about. And one other thing I wanted to mention about the film is the music. Obviously, the main theme of the film, the music is composed by Brett Fiedel, and the main Terminator team. I don't really remember his work before the Terminator. I think this film made him kind of more like famous and sought after. And the main team is great, and the music, it's very fitting for the film, for its atmosphere. Later, he did music for Fright Night, which was also really good, and for several other films. But as far as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, this was his like a first major breakthrough for Brad Fiedel for the music.
I'm not sure if that's the case, but again, it's one of those. It's one of the. This is one of those movies where there's just a bajillion anecdotes and trivia beats you
Yeah.
can find. But one of the things I do recall from the film is that when the actual beat, like the sort of the leitmotif of the Terminator, that sound that's like that. It's supposed to both resemble some sort of it's like an unnatural heart, mechanical heartbeat, which is perfectly fitting for the villain of the film. It's basically this thing looks like an ordinary organic human, but it's very much not. And yeah, it just fits perfectly. But and it's one of my two of my absolute favorite scenes in the film. Completely work due to the music. There's the shootout at the nightclub, which has
Yeah.
"Burning in the Third Degree," which is a very, very, very catchy 80s rock anthem. And there's also the at the police station, just the music that plays. It's like has this like low level intensity. It's just like it's just perfect thriller music. Like it's both a perfect mixture of action and horror. It's just like something intense is going on, but it's quite horrific at the same time. Like what's normally an impenetrable fortress is being completely destroyed. It reminded me of a video I saw years ago of giant Japanese hornets going into a European beehive and completely slaughtering them with no opposition. It's the same feeling. It's an incredible. I know we're going on. I'm going away from the theme of music, but the scene is just incredible. It shows that this thing has absolutely no fear and that there's basically
Mhm.
no barrier that can actually keep you safe from him.
Exactly. That's the like unstoppable killing machine, horrific killing machine, and that's they certainly got that feeling right. And the music is great. Yeah, that mechanical heartbeat that's part of the main team and all that. It's simply it's perfect. Yeah. when it comes to the cinematography, yeah, cinematography is really also really good for this film. It's mostly he mostly uses blue and lots of the stuff we see in the dark, in the shadows, and but the cinematography is also really great. Also when it comes to the budget of this film, Cameron obviously used the sets and the real life real locations and for the maximum effect. And yeah, he used his knowledge and the experience from the previous movies to really make the best out of the budget. I mean, yeah, he was he did made paintings for Escape from New York. He did for Roger Corman for Galaxy of Terror. For many, he basically saved many of those films. Not really a Carpenter film, but many Roger Corman films from the early '80s, and with his like. Effects work and made painting work and things like that, because I mean he was obviously he knew all, I guess, all the skills that he needed to know to become a really good film director. And yeah, we I don't know really what happened with Piranha 2, but basically I think he wasn't really feeling inspired himself. He was just, you know, and plus it was basically they took it away from him and made a mess out of it. So it's really not, cannot say his real film debut is the Terminator. And I think that's something that he himself said in a way, jokingly, but that's basically true.
I think it's an interesting case. It reminds me of Stanley Kubrick on Spartacus.
Um,
He was famously brought in to replace Anthony Mann, and the movie just became sort of he was in a sense a hired gun, and as a result, I don't know if he actually ever Kubrick ever actually outright disowned that movie, which I'm quite fond of,
right.
but his heart wasn't into it. And that seems to be what happened with Piranha, but.
Mm,
It's just interesting to see how time and fitting with the theme of the movie. It's interesting how time takes a turn. Like somebody noticed him, I believe, on Galaxy of Terror because he figured out how to make maggots crawl by using a minor device that would cause an electrical shock to pulsate that made them freak out, and that's what led to him getting noticed. And well, the rest eventually became history. He would get a job doing Piranha 2, and eventually he got a chance to do Terminator, and apparently it was quite rough. Even his own life, man, at the time mirrors it. I remember he was practically sleeping in a car, and he was doing everything he could to stay afloat and afford money, and like it was a bit rough, but ultimately the film was a success, and yeah, it's it deserved to be as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, obviously. Yeah, I forgot really how the whole details of the pre-production. How I'm not sure how he got them to give him money, but I mean he certainly had lots of previous experience, and yeah, he made it. He made the budget work, the low budget work, really well. And yeah, this is certainly one of the overall one of the best movies of the '80s.
100% agreed.
Yeah, one of the and yeah, one of the best movies of the last few decades, I would say. And another interesting anecdote about it, you know, we talked about it before, but and I'm sure some people know about it. That again, talking about this kind of elitist approach to cinema, but again recognizing great cinema. That Terminator was one of the movies that Andrei Tarkovsky really liked. And so yeah, this is one of his very he usually didn't like this kind of like a genre cinema or action cinema or horror or something like that, but Terminator was something that he considered like almost a masterpiece. So yeah, I
If
don't
I'm
know.
not mistaken, he did denounce the acting as being of very low quality, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it's it is what it is, as the old expression goes. So, but yes, no, I have heard of that, and it's fascinating. And yeah.
I don't know what when it comes to the anecdote we've said at the beginning of the episode. I don't know what Bergman thought of Terminator, but I guess he would be a little more tolerant than Tarkovsky when it comes to these things. He certainly liked more. He liked American films more than Tarkovsky. I think there is a picture of him at the set of Jaws also. I mean, him standing by the shark, the model, the giant model of the shark. So I'm not exactly sure. I can find it somewhere, but yeah, there is. I think I saw it some like a year or two ago or somewhere on social media. Yeah. Overall, yeah, Terminator is a wonderful movie. Great, big recommendation. I mean, I'm sure many or all of you have seen it. If not, definitely see it. That's like a big recommendation for it.
Yes, if even a single one of you has not seen it and you decide to go out and watch it, then damn it, this podcast has all been worth it. So, any closing thoughts, Sasha?
No, I mean that would be like I guess that would be a fitting closing thing to recommend everyone to watch this movie. And yeah, we are gonna explore many other uh, genres, movies, and all kinds of stuff in the future episodes. And thank you for listening. And we'll follow us, share us if you want, and expect a new episode soon. Bye.
Yes, thank you very much for listening. Bye now.
Bye.